Hello folks and welcome back to the channel for part 2 of 10 creepy or disturbing images. So let's get straight into it with number 10, the death of Omayra Sanchez. On November 13th, 1985, a volcanic eruption sent an enormous mudslide through the village of Armero, Colombia, trapping 13-year-old Omayra Sanchez in the debris. She was immediately pinned down by the wreckage of her own house, with only her head and arms above the floodwater. For almost 3 entire days, rescuers tried in vain to free her as she slowly succumbed to gangrene and hypothermia in the water. Finally, on November 16th, she passed away, as helpless relief workers watched from a mere feet away. Just before she died, photographer Frank Fournier captured this haunting image. Fournier later recalled that he felt totally powerless in front of this little girl, who was facing death with courage and dignity. Number 9. Now this is a photograph that's very famous and probably a well-known one to everyone watching. This is the Amityville Ghost Boy. This image was captured inside the Amityville Horror House in 1976. This creepy vintage photo remains one of the most chilling paranormal images of all time. After the DeFeo murders, the house's next owner, George Lutz, claimed that the home was haunted and called in famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren for help. One night, the automatic camera they'd set up on the second floor caught what appeared to be a ghostly boy staring back. Some believe it's the ghost of young John DeFeo, who was murdered in the house by his brother years earlier. Number 8. A shell-shocked soldier of World War I. Before shell shock was called war neurosis or post-traumatic stress disorder, and before experts actually began to understand the psychological trauma that war would cause, veterans of World War I were largely left to fight their own mental health battles. This historical image of the shell-shocked soldier seen here starkly highlights the horror of war, and what being stuck in a trench during battles could do to a man. Captured in September 1916, this photo was taken years before World War I even ended. By the time the end came, countless other men would suffer a similar fate. Number 7. The Mummies of Venzoni. In 1647, labourers working on a cathedral in Venzoni, Italy, found the eerily preserved remains of a man inside a tomb in the churchyard. His body had dried and shriveled to just 33 pounds, leaving his skin like parchment, but he hadn't decomposed. After more corpses like this one were found in the ensuing decades and centuries, locals and experts alike were long baffled as to how these bodies had been naturally mummified. Since the early 20th century, many have believed that a certain fungus was responsible, while more modern theories say that the particular soil and water conditions are the explanation. However, the mummies of Venzoni remain largely mysterious to this day. Number 6. The death of Vladimir Komarov. When Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov was tapped to pilot the Soyuz 1 mission, slated for April 23, 1967, he knew he was doomed. The craft had showed problems during testing, and it was clear that the man put inside it would not come back alive. Although dangers were clear, no one was willing to back out and risk disappointing the Soviet high command. Komarov refused to back out because in doing so, he would have doomed the next pilot in line, friend and fellow cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin. Sure enough, upon re-entry the craft's parachute failed, and Komarov burned to death as the Soyuz hurtled through the atmosphere at unthinkable speeds. With that, he became the first human to ever die in spaceflight. Even before his fateful flight, he was so sure that he would die that he asked for an open casket funeral. Why? His final revenge was forcing his superiors to look upon what they had done. Number 5. Hanalor Smats, the skeleton atop Mount Everest. Hanalor Smats was the 4th woman in the world to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Tragically, she was also the first woman to die on it. The German mountaineer and her husband embarked on their journey in 1979 with high hopes, but during the descent after reaching the summit, Smats grew weak from the trek and succumbed to exhaustion and the cold. For years after Smats died, her body lay frozen on the mountainside just as she had fallen, sitting down against her backpack, her hair blowing in the wind and her eyes wide open. Other climbers who passed her corpse on the trail would say they could feel her eyes follow them as they walked by. Number 4. Inside a mental institution in the 1900s. Few creepy old photos are more disturbing than those captured inside the mental institutions of decades and centuries past. Seen here is one of the countless patients being restrained in a French mental institution in 1900. It's unclear what condition this unfortunate patient suffered from. At the time, people could get committed from anything from depression and shell shock to schizophrenia and learning disabilities. With the abuses of patients like this one happening behind closed doors, we'll surely never know the extent of the trauma that these people suffered inside the institutions of old. Number 3. Unit 731. Before and during World War II, Japan's Biological and Chemical Weapons Division, Unit 731, carried out some of the most grotesque human experiments in history. Determined to master germ warfare and test the limits of human suffering, Unit 731 conducted a wealth of torturous tests on captured Chinese civilians that ranged from purposeful frostbite and vivisection on conscious patients to weapons testing on live prisoners. Seen here, Unit 731 personnel are conducting a bacteriological trial on a test subject in November 1940. Number 2. The Ice Mummies of the Lost Franklin Expedition. Back when maritime expeditions were voyages into complete unknown, setting out to sea was as adventurous as it was deadly. For John Hartnell of the infamous Franklin expedition of 1845, the Arctic quest to find the Northwest Passage ended in icy doom. The 134-man crew set out in 2 ships, determined to find the elusive shortcut to Asia and thereby further open up British trade. But soon after departing England in May, they were never to be seen again. It was only in the 1980s that an anthropologist finally found some of the buried bodies, preserved by the cold on an icy island in the Canadian Arctic. Hartnell's twisted expression here makes for one of the creepiest images of seafaring expeditions ever taken. Number 1, and one that's very close to home for myself, the Omagh bombing of 1998. The Omagh bombing in Northern Ireland on August 15, 1998 killed 29 people and injured more than 200 bystanders. Carried out by members of the Real Irish Republican Army, it was the deadliest attack during the 3-decade-long conflict known as the Troubles. Arguably the most chilling photo taken during the entirety of the Troubles, this image shows a happy father with his carefree son standing next to a car in Omagh that was wired with explosives and about to blow. They both died moments later. Thank you for joining me for another episode of 10 Creepy Photographs. I look forward to speaking to you next time. Over and out from Lisa Loves.